1. Think we're good. Just checking. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to an emergency Third Apron podcast. I am your host, Yossi Goslin. With me, as usual, my co-host, Sam Quinn. And we've got breaking news today about like 6-ish hours ago. We finally got the inevitable news that everybody's been waiting for. The Mavericks have finally fired Nico Harrison. The Mavericks are off to, what is it, like a 2-7, 3-7 start for the season. But whatever plans Nico Harrison had, they were pretty much down the toilet as soon as that Kyrie Irving injury happened. So this era, the Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving era, potentially might only have lasted that one game together. And now the Mavericks, they have elevated from within Michael Finley and Matt Riccardi to be the head executives going forward. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into just more on the firing itself, what the Mavericks should do to navigate the season. And of course, we're going to get into fake trades, because now that Nico's gone, you can expect that they're very much going to be listening to deals on his top guys, on Anthony Davis, on Kyrie Irving. But Sam, I wanted to start this by discussing something that I think I talked about earlier in the offseason when we started talking about the inevitability that the Mavericks would fire Nico Harrison. And that's the way it would go down and be reported. So I remember around like maybe June, I talked about the hierarchy in which people in the NBA, when they get fired, let go, whatever it is, there's a lot of different terminology can be described as. You've got from like the very most like respectable way, I guess, there's like parting of ways. And then you go down the list, there's relieved, dismissed, fired, and then there's just he's out. I feel like that one is like the harshest.
Wasn't that Tom Thibodeau in Chicago? I'm looking for the terminology on that one. I'm thinking of the ones that were harshest, and that's the one that comes to mind.
So look, I don't have the exact science down, but I feel like that's kind of the hierarchy where when a guy, it's announced that it was a parting of ways, it's like, okay, we really like the guy. He's got a lot of respect in the league. He's probably going to get another job. We're going to make it seem like there was some agency in this. And then you go down where it's like when you get to like fired or the guy's out, that's kind of where, okay, like, the guy clearly did a bad job and, we're not going to go easy on him. So I just want to know, when you thought about how this was going to go down, how did you think it would have gone down, knowing that hierarchy of ways you can fire someone?
I was sort of thinking Nico being the PR or whatever the opposite of master is. I was sort of wondering if he might resign when it became inevitable, just as sort of a spin where he could kind of say, look, my plan was brilliant. I just knew it was untenable with the way that the fans were reacting because they weren't smart enough to see my genius in this plan that I've concocted. So I'm stepping away for the good of the team. I thought we might get that, but like, no, man, he kind of just got beheaded this morning. Like the terminology that I saw, not in the letter, but like it was an outright fired from the Shams tweet. And we've known this was coming for like 24 hours at least. Like this is I was so certain that this firing was coming. I've never done this in now parts of 7 seasons at CBS Sports. We published candidates for the job before he got fired. I've never done that. That's how certain this was. That's how adamant all of the reporting was, that like he's gone. They're just figuring out what the next steps are. I mean, it was inevitable the moment he made the trade. I would argue you could even say it was inevitable even further back when you start to talk about some of the dynamics involved in like how he acquired this much power. And that's something I do want to talk about in a little bit more depth as we move on. But yeah, I was kind of thinking like, is he going to resign to try to save some face, because the way it went down, like, no, man, he was dragged into the public square and beheaded for the whole world to see.
Yeah, now I'm going to start looking more into the terminology used whenever
By the
high-ranking
way,
people get let go.
you have to read this Thibodeau statement. Just as an aside, if you're interested in this stuff at all, it is wild. Anyway, go on.
No, I remember that. I do remember there was like a very weird.
A long letter by Jerry Reinsdorf. Unfortunately, there has been a departure from this culture, is the start of the second paragraph.
Yeah, I thought that this was going to be a parting of ways, mainly because it was kind of unclear how the ownership was going to respond to the just a disaster that's unfolded ever since Luka was traded. There's been no acknowledgement at all to this point that mistakes were made. So that's the thing when you're doing, depending how you're letting the person go, is that the nicer you are with it, then there's less accountability. But when you say you're firing someone, you're relieving somebody that you're making the decision, and thus some types of mistakes were made. And they took a pretty high level of accountability. Not only did they fire him, which comes with the an admittance that mistakes were made, but Patrick Dumont, governor of the Mavericks, also went out and wrote a letter to the fans, which I think was kind of a bare minimum thing that he had to do, just to like at least acknowledge that things have not gone well at all, that there's been a lot of turmoil. Basically, I understand the profound impact these difficult last several months have had. That's the biggest thing. That's like the biggest acknowledgement about everything that went down. That's the quote from the open letter. So I think this was much needed, just so you can try to reach back at parts of the fan base that they've alienated, because clearly this was also very much a business inspired decision. Seems like internally things are not like they've been hit financially by a lot of fans not coming back, and the South streak ended. Like, it's pretty obvious that this was a step needed to try to rebuild the fan base. So I think it's fine. The way they did it, they do finally take some responsibility for the decisions they've made. And now they can start to move forward. And that's what the focus of this podcast is going to be. I think we and everyone in the media have already beaten the dead horse as far as like everything he's done wrong. They're in a pretty tricky situation.
I don't want to talk about what Nico did wrong for a second. I think it's important to talk about what ownership did wrong. I think because ownership is remaining in place, right? Nico is gone, but Patrick Dumont still owns the team. I think it's worth talking, especially as we've seen recently, whether it's Matt Ishbia decimating the Suns or the Celtics' new ownership taking over and then blowing up the title team, a little bit more warranted. But like, new ownership syndrome is, rampant in the NBA right now. And I think this is an important topic to talk about before we actually dive into the specifics of the Dallas situation. How did we get here? How did Nico Harrison ascend to a level of power that allowed him to trade Luka Doncic? I think this is a pretty important point and something that other new owners should keep in mind. Every organization is different. The title that somebody has for your team does not necessarily equate to an equivalent title on another team. So what do I mean by that? Nico Harrison was hired as a Mark Cuban general manager. What that means is that Nico Harrison was hired to be a voice in the room among many. For 20-something years, Mark Cuban made every final decision when it came to basketball matters for the Mavericks. Donnie Nelson was obviously very, very influential. Coaches have been influential. Other people have been in that room. But Mark Cuban is not hiring a general manager to toss him the keys and say, you've got this. And I think where this went wrong is that when Mark Cuban sold the team to Dumont and Miriam Adelson, they just kind of looked at Nico and said, well, he's the GM, and the GM for a normal team is the guy who makes all the decisions. And since we're not basketball experts, we should just trust him, without recognizing that he wasn't hired for basketball expertise. He was a sneaker executive. He was hired to be a recruiter, which was the area that Dallas had struggled with for so many years. They had max cap space so many off seasons. They always failed to actually recruit guys as free agents. They hired Nico for that, not because they thought he knew how to build a roster on his own. He was going to be a voice in the room. I think this is an important lesson for new owners to take when they take over teams. Don't just look at the people in the building and say, like, oh, he has this title, that means X, Y, or Z. You kind of have to actually audit your entire organization when you take it over and like think critically about the people you have in these important roles. Because I think if they would have asked around a little bit more, they might have learned that Nico Harrison shouldn't be the one making these decisions. So yes, he's gone, and that's good for the Mavericks. I hope sincerely that the next GM that the Mavericks hire is going to be somebody with more of a basketball background and who has been thoroughly vetted, because the Mavericks didn't think to do that with Nico Harrison when Patrick Dumont took over. That's all I want to say. They didn't understand the person that they empowered, and that cost them, frankly, the worst trade in NBA history, or one of them. I just think that's an important point that we should get across, because we are in the midst of a new owner syndrome pandemic in the NBA.
I would push back a little bit because I'm not sure this is a new owner syndrome. New owner syndrome is, when Matt Ishbia takes over and immediately trades everything, all the picks and the cupboard on top of Mikal Bridges for the nice and shiny Kevin Durant. But in this case, this is like an unprecedented level. And I mean, maybe I'm off on this. Maybe more owners out there in sports all throughout all the professional leagues, maybe there's a lot more that lack an understanding of the sport that they have ownership in. And this is like an unprecedented combination of a massive misevaluation from the guy supposed to understand the sport, and then a complete, seems to me like a complete non-understanding on the ownership level of the sport that they just got into. And that led to some like very few safeguards for this crippling move that took place. So I think if it's now just for anyone trying to get into the sport, you got to be very careful. Any new owner, anyone trying to get ownership of a professional sports team, they got to be a lot more mindful about who they have under them, and they gotta really they gotta learn everything as well. Like, you gotta know at the same time, like, that you are qualified enough to say yes and no on certain things, because you're asking, how did Nico get this much power? Well, he just took the Mavs to the finals. And like, that was pretty much his team. He left his imprint on it.
Before that, though, because he was making the trade. Like, he traded for Kyrie, and they missed the playoffs. They're in the lottery. He makes those trades at the deadline for Gafford and for Washington. And people forget this. They were not like a high seed when they made those trades. They were kind of in the play-in mix, I think. Like, something clearly happened when Mark Cuban sold the team to the Dumonts and to Miriam Adelson, where Nico Harrison nudged him out. Nico Harrison won some sort of power struggle with Mark Cuban, because Mark Cuban thought that he was going to be able to run basketball ops after the sale. He still owns 27% of the team. And I think it's incumbent upon you as Patrick Dumont and as the Adelsons to know, hey, Mark Cuban has run this team successfully for 20, 25 years at this point. If we're buying the team from him and he's still going to hold a significant stake, it makes sense for us to lean on his expertise early on and not like let him do whatever he wants running the team. If Mark Cuban had come to you and said, I want to trade Luka, you should have said no to that too. But trust, like, hey, this guy's been running a basketball team for a long time. Why are we trusting Nico over him? That's the thing that I think they really messed up on. I feel like they didn't have the relationships and they didn't seek out the expertise that they needed to seek out when they first bought the team. And that made them especially vulnerable to a bad GM like Nico Harrison.
Yeah, no, and this is where just it takes a certain amount of background knowledge and context. It takes years to understand. Like, these are things that, now we take for granted, like all this context of like the Mavs ownership structure, management structure, who is along, who you can tell is in charge of, like, has their hands on certain moves. Like, that's something that takes a long time to understand. So at the very least, it's like, you're right. They were vulnerable, but how do you sign off on such a colossal, like on a big move like that?
Well,
Like you
how do
need
you
to,
like? The question is like, why aren't you asking Dirk Nowitzki what he thinks? Why aren't you asking Adam
right.
Silver what he thinks? Like, I'm not saying you have to go ask the fans, but like, you can't send a couple of texts, make a couple of phone calls. That's like basic stuff. Adam Silver would have said no. Actually, no, I take that back. Adam Silver would have said like, good idea, because he would have wanted Luka with Lakers. If you would have asked Dirk, he would have told you no. If you would have asked Cuban, he would have told you no. If you would have asked any like notable Mavericks figure, they would have told him no. What I take from this is that he trusted Nico Harrison so much that he sought out no other expertise.
Yeah. I think that, again, this is like, I think it shows like if you're getting into, when you're getting into sports though, like this, at this level, you're going to own a professional team. You need like whatever this ownership group is, whoever is like in that circle, at least one of you need to have that like thorough basketball knowledge context for like at least the past few years. And it feels like no one in that circle had it, which led to the someone in the front office convincing them to do this. And that'll be a huge cautionary tale for anyone trying to get ownership into sports now. It's in the end, it's on ownership. You're the one signing this off. You are the safeguard against yourself in the end. So now we're here, and now the big question is, how are the Mavs going to navigate this, at least for the rest of this season? We're seeing a lot of people out there, they're pitching that the Mavs should blow it up, do a full scale rebuild, trade Anthony Davis, trade Kyrie Irving, trade everybody, and rebuild around Cooper Flag. And to a certain extent, yes, that's absolutely true. In most cases, that is what they should do, but it's a little complicated. And I think they're going to have to kind of do like a plan for the rest of this season and then a different plan for the rest of the next few years. And the reason for that is that they don't have control of their draft picks between 2027 and 2030. They're out 2 first round picks in 27, 29, and they don't have, they traded swaps in 2028 and 2030. And when these trades happened, they were pretty risky at the time because it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Luka Doncic was going to extend with the Mavericks. There was rumors throughout like the past 5 years, even before he extended with the Mavs back in 2021, if he would be long-term for them. And after what a disaster the 2023 season was, that re-entered the zeitgeist. And for them to go back to then for them to go to the finals the next year, and Luka seemed happy. It seemed like he was all set to sign the Supermax. He qualified for it early. He would have been able to sign it this past offseason. Seemed like they mitigated that risk of trading all these future draft picks because you're going to have Luka. You're going to your floor is being a playoff team as long as he's healthy. And they completely got, brought back the risk by trading him. And the window for this team seems like it's over. So how would you navigate this season, the rest of this season? I think it's pretty obvious, but I want to hear from you.
I mean, I was saying trade Anthony Davis the moment he got hurt against Houston last year. I mean, that's been obvious even before Flag that this was a failure, and they had this very brief window where they controlled their own picks. And like, getting Flag insulates you a lot. You don't need to get a franchise player in 2026, but like, if you're picking number 6 this year in a good draft and you also have Flag, that's a pretty good start. And like, you can sit Kyrie Irving out the whole year. You don't even have to trade him. You could just sit him out this entire year, bring him back next year after you've tanked, and like, bam, right away, you're suddenly like pretty good. Not great, depending on what else you do, but like reasonably competitive with a guard in place who can move Cooper Flag back to forward full time. Getting rid of Anthony Davis is the big thing for a few reasons, right? He's the player that ostensibly would have the most trade value. We can talk about that. I'm not convinced that his trade value is, frankly, as high as they probably think it is. You have to get rid of him, not only to get that value, but because he's extension eligible after the season, now that Nico Harrison's gone, you don't have that impetus to extend him, because if Nico had been there, he would have had to have extended Anthony Davis just to justify the trade. Now, thankfully, a new GM could be a little bit more patient, but I just don't want Anthony Davis on his next contract. The whole reason you're getting him is to give yourself a window over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe. So you got to move him before that extension really gets into the picture. The big question I have now is he going to play another game for the Mavericks? Because what we heard was that Patrick Dumont was involved in the decision to keep holding him out, that he was ready to come back over the weekend, but Dumont wanted to keep him off of the floor. You can't put him out there and risk another injury. His trade value's already been impacted enough. Aside from the injury, he just hasn't played well this year. So I think the thought here is definitely trade Davis. Listen to offers for most of the other veterans. Is PJ Washington trade eligible?
No, he cannot be traded this year. That extension took him the 6 months restriction will go past the trade deadline.
Okay, so you can't trade Washington. You can trade Gafford though, right? Because his raise wasn't big enough. So you can trade Gafford. I would.
He's been trade eligible immediately.
I would listen on Najee Marshall. I think he's worth something.
Yes.
I would go down the list. I'd want to keep Christie, and I'd want to keep Lively. But other than that, I'd probably trade just about anyone who I could get value for. You're not going to get a gold mine back. I'm sorry. You're trading Anthony Davis. You're not trading Luka Doncic. But you could get enough back that with Flag and with a decent pick this year, and you'd have some trade assets to bring in more role players, you could build this thing back up pretty quickly.
Yes. Then, so let me build up to that point where, one, you say maybe they can get a top 6 pick. Yes. I saw ESPN BPI projections. They have them projected to have the 7th worst record in the league. I kind of agree. I think that's kind of where they'll fall. I think it'll be kind of tough, especially if Cooper Flag does start to make some meaningful improvements throughout the year, and they're going to want to play him for most of the year. I have a hard time seeing them break below the Nets, Pelicans, Jazz, Wizards tier. So I think 5 through 7 seems like an appropriate place. And this is the last year that they have control of their pick. So I feel pretty good that that's going to be the pivot now, that they're going to go take a trip to the lottery one more time, because they won't be able to these next 4 years. So then the other thing is, you do that, you get your pick, but what if you're not ready these next few years? So I look at this situation, and the Mavericks are not in the worst situation, and that's mainly because they have Cooper Flag. They have got a player that's better projected than just about the best player on all these bottom tier teams. They're already far ahead of all those teams in the bottom of the league by lucking out into getting him. They had another lottery pick recently in Derek Lively, and he was impactful immediately. He's going to keep getting better, I think. And the possibility of them getting one more lottery pick this year, if you can get a top 7 pick potentially that jumps into the top 4, you have an amazing foundation to start this off with these next 4 years. So obviously the expectations are going to be lower. They're not going to be a championship contender, but I feel pretty good that if they make the right moves, this could be more like an Indiana Pacers type of retool, where the Pacers, they were in the lottery only 2 years. They didn't get the top pick, but they got the 6th pick, the 7th pick. And even those guys didn't really they weren't major contributors for their finals run. That was mostly the Halliburton trade. So you already have 2 players in your foundation. You've got another one potentially coming up with this draft pick. You're not going to get a haul of draft picks for Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. You're not going to get those picks back. You're not going to, maybe there's some small deals they can make with some of these teams. All right, I just want to make a point that this isn't like the Brooklyn Nets, who was able to make a trade with the Rockets and get all their picks back in one fell swoop. They have a pick to Brooklyn. They've got a pick to Charlotte. They've got to swap
San Antonio,
to
Charlotte,
Houston.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, they got to swap to Houston. They got to swap to Oklahoma City. So it's very complicated. Maybe as you get closer to those drafts, there's something you can do to get control of your draft back. But I think there is a scenario where they could turn whatever expendable players that they have, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington in the future. Like, I feel like they are all going to have positive value. I don't think they're going to have like immense trade value, but through trading those players, I think you can get the combination of young players or at least draft picks in the upcoming draft to start to properly build around Cooper. You already got your front court set for the most part. You need a new backcourt. You got a nice piece in Max Christie. Like, you can turn this, I think they could turn this around pretty quickly with a couple savvy moves here or there. So yeah, I wouldn't expect any haul for these guys, but I could see there is a pathway. You know, it's more so improbable right now, but there's a pathway where they can like at least be somewhat competitive starting next year, maybe start to make a run towards the play-in.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, especially like if Kyrie is still on the team and you've sat him out all this year and he comes back healthy. Like, Kyrie was an all-star last year and Kyrie is still very, very good. We don't know how he'll look post ACL, but like if you have year 2 Cooper Flag and Kyrie still mostly looking like Kyrie and like some of the supporting cast left over and whatever salary you take back in these trades, yeah, you'll probably be pretty good. Like, I don't think this is going to be an extended situation where they're totally hopeless and in the tank. Like, if they hadn't gotten Flag, that might be where they ended up. But as it is, I think they're still in like a relatively promising position.
Yeah, no, they've gone through the unintentional rebuild. Like they're in a rebuild right now, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And I think they are acknowledging it. Like, getting Cooper Flag, getting the number 1 pick, that's a rebuilding situation, and you're going to get another lottery pick this year. Like, that's really that's all they need. And I think they have enough positive value with the players on their roster where they could easily just retool this team. You don't need to get another superstar. Let's just get some like players that fit the mold of whatever build they want to build around Cooper Flag, because like, now that's the first thing they're going to start to figure out. Like, what do they envision the roster looking around Cooper Flag?
The important thing to remember here is that he's literally 18, right? So like the decisions you make in the next year are important. Getting this high pick this year is important just because you have no other chances to do it. But like, the team you build for him when he's 20 is not necessarily the team you'll have for him when he's 24, right? Like, he still has after this year, he still has 3 more years left on his rookie deal where he's relatively cheap. Like, I think something a lot of teams do in this situation is they plan to have a lot of cap space in the great rookie's third off season, because that's right before he extends. So that's the last year where he's cheap, spend a bunch of money then. And after that, you get expensive and you're trying to win. But like, at that point, say we get to the off season in 2028, Cooper's after his 3rd season. This year's draft pick is after his 2nd. You have cap space. You go spend a bunch of money then. And like, boom, we're trying to win end of the decade. And like, we feel pretty good about where we are. So yeah, I mean, look, he's 18 and we think he's going to be an all NBA player. When you have that, that's the hardest part.
Yeah. And so we're in a way better position than any team could ask for entering this precarious situation where they're not going to have control of their draft picks over the next few years. And the team right now is bad, but they can turn this around a lot quicker than people might be thinking. So
let's make trades. Let's make some fake trades. We're ready.
Let's get into it. And I think this will be more like, we'll get into fake trades. I don't have any concrete ones, to be honest.
Can I go first then?
But I just want to preface this by saying, like, I think this is going to be more a deep dissection of the market, because I had a very hard time coming up with trades, trades that make sense for the other team, finding teams that even make sense to take on these players, and figuring out what the adequate value is going to be. Like, we had such a hard time figuring out what trades were out there for Ja Morant. Like, we came to the conclusion that we don't think he's going to get traded. And we're a week and a half away from that. I still feel the same way. Even though I would believe that internally Memphis may already have decided, yeah, we're going to move on from him eventually. This is even tougher. And whatever the Mavericks do get back for Anthony Davis, it's going to be so underwhelming. It's that he was the centerpiece of the Luka Doncic trade. Nothing against him as a player, but just given his age and injury history and the lack of picks that came with him. Like they might come out of this Luka Doncic trade with like maybe one rotation starting level player, whoever they get back for him, that can fit the mold. Might not be an all-star level player.
Well, Max Christie is already a rotation level player, so like you're playing with house money if that's the goal. It's lower than people think it's going to be based on his value and based on his name value. I'll say this: when we talked about Ja Morant, I think we came to the conclusion that there is no team in the NBA today that is a Ja Morant away from competing for a championship. Do you agree with that assessment?
100%.
So I don't know that it's that simple where Anthony Davis is concerned, because I think before the injuries, before doubt, like last year in November and December, Anthony Davis looked like Anthony Davis. Then he gets hurt, and then he gets traded, and then he winds up on a team that makes no sense. If you believe that the guy he was at the beginning of last year is still in there, and I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption if you can get him healthy and get him on the right kind of team, he is a much more impactful player than Ja Morant. I think there are teams out there that he could make a significant difference for competing for the championship this season. That wasn't the case for Ja Morant. So I do think we are operating with a somewhat wider pool, but for a variety of reasons that we'll get into on a team-by-team basis, it's hard to construct a trade. He's making $54.6 million this year. That's hard to trade. He is extension eligible, as we've covered in the offseason. I don't know how many teams are going to be eager to sign that extension. Is he willing to play full-time center? Because I think the Mavericks were the only team that was willing to entertain this power forward notion that yes, he can't shoot well enough to play power forward on a championship level team. I think that we both agree with that. Like, he has to play at least a good chunk of his minutes at center, if not all of them. Like, there are complicating factors here. Anthony Davis is a good enough player to impact the championship race this season, but trading for him is more complicated than that. So I want first dibs on throwing out fake trades. And I think we're going to agree on which side says no to this, but I think it's an important example that we start with.
Can I just add one more thing? I just want to add one more thing about how with the extension, he'll be extension eligible in the offseason. And I think if you're Anthony Davis at this point, you probably do want to get traded. And it's not because the Mavericks are going to be bad.
They fired your friend.
They fired the guy that wanted you in and was probably going to give you that next contract. So I would take a pretty good guess that now the organization is not interested in extending Anthony Davis right now, especially with multiple years left on his contract. And that if you're Davis, you probably want to get to that next team that would like to extend you. I would probably guess that a max extension is off the table that would pay him like $70-80 million a year going forward. And so you just want to get to the team that wants you the most, values you the most, and at least give you some sort of extension, if not now, but like at least a year and a half from now. So that will definitely play into things.
Too, he already has a ring. He doesn't have to ring chase. I'm sure he'd rather play for a championship contender. But if there's a location that he wants to be, if it's all about the money, like he has a little bit more optionality than a guy who's like, I really, really want to win a championship and I haven't done it yet. Let me make the first fake trade here.
All right.
Okay. Yossi, who says no? Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first round pick for Austin Reeves and cap filler.
All right.
You know who says no. Just say it.
Okay. So I think the Lakers, I don't know if they say no.
The Lakers say no. Yossi, the Lakers say no.
I'll say this.
Aside from that, it's a 5-for-2 trade or something like that. Austin Reeves has more trade value today than Anthony Davis does.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. They say no. I say no for sure. I'll say this. The only type of Austin Reeves trade I'd seriously consider right now is if you can get like a Desmond Bane, Mikal Bridges type package from like a mediocre team offering all their first for him, a team that wouldn't be able to sign him outright. Because I think there's a argument that that path could help the Lakers get a deeper roster and potentially another star later. And maybe if you could turn a fraction of that back into potentially Anthony Davis, then it's kind of worth considering. Yeah. And I'm not just, but I would say no. And it's not just an overreaction to the way Reeves is playing. I think right now there's just I have a lot of questions about how Anthony Davis is going to look going forward, especially just even these next 2 years while he's still on this contract. So I think they're better off just writing out the team the way it is. Do you think there's a way that the Lakers could get Anthony Davis without trading Austin Reeves?
If I were the Lakers, I have the math in front of me. You can go 5-for-1 and it works against the cap, but then the Lakers have to fill out their roster, which is another set of concerns. But like the money is close to even if it's Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleba, and Dalton Connect. And then you just throw in all of your draft assets, which is the 31 pick, 30, 32 swaps. You can't do 33 yet. Like, you make the offer, I guess, because if you had LeBron, Luka, Austin, and AD, like, and I guess Marcus Smart too, like, you would just win the title with those 5 guys.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's even like feasible. You're not making a 5-for-1 trade in season. So if Austin Reeves isn't in it, I just don't think you could realistically do it. Even then, matching the money is hard, right? You can't trade Austin Reeves at $13 million straight up for Anthony Davis at 54. So I don't think the Lakers are really a feasible destination for the moment. Maybe in the offseason if it dragged that far when they have cap space, but I just think this is an important barometer because I don't think the Lakers would trade Austin Reeves unless it directly led to them getting a better player than Austin Reeves. And honestly, Austin Reeves has been better this year than Anthony Davis. I don't know if that persists, but the guys we've seen so far this year, Austin Reeves has been better.
Yeah. So my version of the trade, which is just slightly different than yours. I put it up where I removed Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleba, but then DeAndre Ayton, just because they might need a little more cushion below that first apron.
Doesn't he have he can't be traded, or he has veto rights, or is that only from non-bird to early bird? Because he has the 1+1.
Yeah, okay. Ayton has no restriction, so they can just trade him as soon as he's eligible in December. So just because they'd be doing a 4-for-1, I figure like you might need like as much cushion as possible within the first apron to get those other 4 roster spots back. Maybe there's another trade you could do with like a trade exception to bring back another rotation player. So look, in reality, I think the Lakers would. I don't even know if they would consider doing LeBron for Davis, just because that is the easier.
Well, he has the no trade, and Dallas wouldn't want him, so that's why I didn't bring it up.
Well, it'd be a multi-team trade. Like, where can LeBron go at this point that he's interested in? I guess the Warriors, but I think that. But then that's like way more complicated.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but they'd rather just get Anthony Davis.
Yeah, so I would guess the Lakers are, if the Anthony Davis is made available, I would imagine the Lakers will make a call, and that offer would be this 5-for-1, that a variation of the 5-for-1s we offered with a 2031 first-round pick and whatever pick swaps they have left. I think they can offer like 4 pick swaps in all the even numbered years.
Yeah, they're not really encumbered. They could offer 26, 28, 30, and 32.
Yeah. Now, look, this is very unlikely. But
yes,
as we get deeper into the exercise, if the imperative for the Mavs is to trade Anthony Davis this season, I don't think this is far off from the best offers out there, because
the reasons that, aside from the value, like they're not going to get an offer that's like that much better, but I think the optics mean they're not going to do it.
I mean, let's see. I would put optics aside. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a reaction. There's going to be, like, you're going to give more fuel to the Laker fans like, oh wow, like so you eventually got Luka Doncic for Max Christie and 2 first round picks. Like there's going to be that sort of dynamic. I get it. But if there is a scenario where the Mavs do decide we got to move AD sooner than later because they have some fears about his health going forward, and they might need to put that pride aside, that they might have to put that aside and like go through the bad optics that would come with it if they believe that they should take the best offer possible, even if that means trading him back to the Lakers. But I think there will be better offers out there. Not significantly more so. So I mostly came up with teams. Let me get the list of teams I had just so I texted them to you, where there's one team I feel pretty good about, could get into things. And then the other teams, it's more opportunity based, kind of like the Lakers. And then others would require some like big restructuring of the roster. So like with the Clippers, I do want to just touch on like with the Ja Morant, I do want to touch on the Clippers because that's just another opportunity based thing where they're struggling. Their defense has fallen off a cliff. We discussed this on the most recent episode of Third Apron podcast. I don't know how they would get it done. I don't know how they feel about playing him at the 4 next to Zubac. I think they'd ideally. I think you want to keep Zubac's contract no matter what. So if you can, but then it's more like a philosophical question. Like, do you want to potentially pair AD with Zubac, and are you willing to trade one of your other starters to make the money work? And on top of that, trade a future first round pick, knowing how perilous a draft pick situation might get with the circumvention penalties potentially coming. I kind of lean towards no, they wouldn't do it, especially because I think they can get potentially some other younger players, which they desperately need right now. They need to get younger.
Yeah, I don't understand what they'd really gain out of this. They're not Anthony Davis away from contending for the title. If I were the Clippers, I'm not trading for any player in his 30s. I'm holding those picks with the idea that, like, look, I don't know what the circumvention penalties could be, so take that with a grain of salt. But I'm just trying to wait this out. I have cap space in the next few summers. I'm trying to sign younger guys then. And then in a couple of years, maybe then I start trading my future draft picks for a younger star. But you trade, if you're the Clippers and you're trading multiple first round picks, it's because you think you can win the title this year. And I think based on what we've seen out of them so far, there's just not evidence that would convince me that like getting Anthony Davis would fix everything that's wrong with that team. Like, that doesn't make Bradley Beal any better.
Yeah. And I just bring them up because age hasn't really been older age hasn't been a number for them. So I would imagine they're definitely discussing how that could work, but I think they can get younger and cheaper targets that would better fit their timeline over the next few years. You go next.
Golden State, we got to talk about. Like, that's the team that Golden State does this with like 4 or 5 guys. There's a headline like once every 14 months that the Warriors are monitoring Giannis Antetokounmpo, and it's like, yeah, no shit, guys. Like, everybody's monitoring Giannis. Anthony Davis was on that list forever about how, oh my God, they'd love to get him, and how like when they draft James Wiseman, it's like they clearly want a vertical lob threat for that offense. They've never really had one, or at least never had a high level one. Davis obviously could do that. He could fit into a defense that switches a lot, could give them more of a traditional rim protector. Is the spacing ideal? No, like for the same reasons it wasn't with Kuminga. But like, who cares? If you have Steph, AD, Draymond, and Jimmy Butler, you're going to be in a pretty good position. So I'm guessing the trade, it would be hard to match money is the issue. Because you got to, I guess it would be Kuminga, Moody, and Hield. Does that get you there financially?
No, because they need to do 100% match. So Jimmy makes the same exact salary as Davis this year.
So long, Jimmy.
So I think that would be the trade, where if the Warriors would be like really interested in AD, that's kind of the deal, because then otherwise you have to do Draymond Kuminga and probably Healed at the very least, or maybe Horford would be enough. And so then you have this 3-headed star trio all making 35% max money. And then that puts the Warriors in a position where they're going to have to like spend a lot of money the following year or two just to put some more adequate depth around these three and go deep into the second apron. I think they feel much better off at this point, keeping the level of depth they have and doing like Kuminga's played really well for them, but I would imagine they're still very much interested in trading him for someone that could be a slightly better fit. Like I'm sure I would imagine they'd still trade Kuminga for Trey Murphy if that was a plausible scenario, which could be as the Pelicans continue. You never know. Look, the Pelicans season, like it's already off the rails. They might make anybody available. So
I mean, how many picks would that take? That's my point. Like Trey Murphy's just better than Kuminga.
Maybe just one. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see what the offer.
You're underselling Murphy.
Well, you're talking about Kuminga and a pick, and then other teams. So that means other teams, if they're not trading any young players, they got to trade like multiple first. Look, we'll see what the market shakes out. Yeah, maybe the Warriors might have to send a second pick on top of that. But either way, I like. Are we in agreement that the next Warriors move is going to be something smaller scale, like trying to bring in another starter who makes around the same as Kuminga, rather than bringing a 35% max player like AD?
Yeah, I mean, look. If you would have asked me a week ago, I would have said the likeliest move for them is like Kuminga for somebody older that fits a little bit better, is ideally more of a shooter scorer. They do need another ball handler. You know, like Jimmy is a good secondary ball handler in games that Steph plays, but he's just not aggressive enough in the games that Steph misses. They need another dribbler. I didn't realize Anthony Davis could come on the market this soon. And I think Golden State tends to operate on a like, just get the talent, we'll figure the rest out later mindset. If I could just do Jimmy and picks, like I'd think about that. Like if you could keep Kuminga, if you could keep the rest of the role players, I don't know. I think that's pretty tempting. You would then presumably have to go out and replace Jimmy's ball handling some other way. But ball handling is relatively easy to find if you're not looking for the highest end. Like if you have to go out and trade, like say you trade Jimmy and picks for Anthony Davis, you could then turn around and trade Kuminga for a guard. Like you could go make another trade. I think that's like one of the few situations where I think Steph, AD, and Draymond, plus the other assets they have, is so good that it could like really vault their championship odds. I'd probably go for it if I was Golden State.
It's definitely worth the discussion. I think it's tough. It's especially now seeing how well Jimmy has integrated with the team. That won't be an easy move to make. And the potential of having to trade additional draft equity while not exactly getting younger. Like, yeah, they're getting technically a little younger, maybe I think by like 2 years. If they do that though, then while keeping Draymond, then I think they probably do have to trade Kuminga to get some extra shooting now, because you're going to have to play them together, Draymond and AD together a good amount. That's the thing though. Like if you're bringing AD, Kerr's probably still going to want to stagger them a good amount. How good do you feel about paying Draymond, $25 million a year plus to, I think at times he might not, would he not close at times if they have AD at the 5? I have to imagine.
I think you would trade Kuminga for like, what I have in mind is like trade Kuminga on a package for Dillon Brooks, and then you close with like Curry, Buddy, Brooks, Draymond, and AD. And like, yeah, is it optimal to have AD and Draymond together? No. But if you have enough shooting everywhere else, like whatever, it's just a lot of talent. Yeah. Just do it.
It'll take additional moves. They can't just swap Jimmy for AD. I think we're in agreement. Like, yeah, it's worth discussing.
It would take a lot of draft capital, but yes.
But they got to do other stuff to then reconfigure the roster. So it wouldn't just be a simple swap. They'd have to do more, and that makes it a little unlikelier. Okay, my next team that like, again, these aren't teams like so far we don't like any of these teams. I think the strongest one I feel about it. I would say out of all the ones we discussed so far, I like the Lakers the most. But another team I thought of is the Sixers. I think they could make a deal happen whether it's with Embiid going out or more likely Paul George going out. They've got some draft picks to trade. I think they have two of their own. They have a very nice and shiny Clippers 2028 first round pick. I think that one's looking pretty good by the day.
And they have a swap too. It's protected, but they do have a Clippers swap.
Yes, for 2027 or 20. Oh, and isn't it 27 and 29? I think they have multiple.
No, I think the Thunder have one of them, and then the Sixers have the other. I think the Thunder have 27, and the Sixers have 29.
Yes, you're right. Yes, I remember now.
And their protections, one of those is top 3, one of them is top 5, but they have them.
Yeah. So for the Sixers, this is one of those cases where if you have the opportunity to turn one of Embiid or Paul George into a different max player, and for someone who's probably going to in my opinion, make them better if they can replace one of them with Anthony Davis. And going forward, I feel better about Anthony Davis long-term than these two, as crazy as weird as that sounds. I would probably consider it depending on the price. And I think they have the adequate draft equity to potentially get something done. It would probably require multiple picks though. Like, are the Mavericks, because you're probably going to need a pick for Davis and then a pick for the contract, whichever one is heading out. Maybe a third team has to be involved. I'm not entirely sure if the Mavericks want to bring in either of those guys, but that is something that I'm sure the Sixers are probably thinking about. Not even so much to salvage this window that they have now. Like, you know, right now the Sixers are kind of looking ahead with Maxey and Edgecombe, and they're mainly probably trying to find ways to get out of the Paul George and Embiid contracts. But if that's a way they can get out of them without having to potentially stretch any of them in the future, I think it just kind of comes down to the price.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple important things to remember here. In any trade with a contract of this magnitude, you do sort of have to weigh, would we rather get the most valuable possible asset, even if that means taking on some bad money, or are we dead set that it has to be neutral or positive value money, and that means we're taking on worse assets? That's very much a team by team basis. But if you're a team like the Mavericks specifically, where your most valuable asset is Cooper Flagg, who has 3 years left on his rookie deal after this one, it might make sense for you specifically to take on a really bad contract if that means getting better assets back, including that Clippers pick in 28. I think if you're the Mavs, it has to be Paul George and not Embiid, because Paul George has 2 years left after this year. So that still does give you a cap space window after Cooper Flagg's 3rd year. If you were to take Embiid instead, he would expire right as Flagg gets expensive. You don't want to have that. You want to have that year of flexibility where you could potentially use cap space or have some more room for a trade. I think that's probably the way you'd have to do it. But I don't know if Embiid and Anthony Davis fit together, but I'm not like totally dismissive of the idea either, because of course you'd stagger them and you could limit their minutes and make sure they never play back-to-backs. It's not the craziest thing. It's not the craziest idea. You're kind of talking me into this.
Yeah, it's like I think it's pretty clear they're gonna want to get off at least one of these two guys, and I think whether it's Embiid or George, you're probably getting a better contract with Davis going forward. So I just think it kind of comes down to the price. Can you do this with one pick and maybe one swap? Probably not, but I think it's definitely worth considering, because you might not have a better opportunity to get off one of these guys.
Well, it's not only that. There is some imperative to do something this year because the East is so weak, where like you might be thinking, oh, the future is Maxey and Edgecombe. We have a 5, 6, 7 year window, but like the East is probably never going to be as vulnerable as it is now. It's pretty gettable, right? Where like, if you turn Paul George into Anthony Davis and you just roll with that team, You could make the finals this year.
Yep. No, it's okay. I don't know if I'll go that far. They could definitely get to the second round.
Why
It's
couldn't they
just
make
with
the finals this year? Like the Knicks and Cavs are good, but they're not the Thunder.
I need to see a lot more from the Sixers. Just VJ Edgecombe's still very young. And it's the Sixers. Like, this is one of the more injury prone teams last year. Like, especially when you're bringing in AD, you still have just as good a chance as Embiid or Paul George making it through the playoffs as AD. So I think it's mostly about reshuffling those contracts. I think that's the biggest thing, because I think we're in agreement. AD with his 2 years left on his contract, better value than Embiid and George.
Well, yes and no, but if you do have to extend him, that might change, because it might functionally be more like AD for 2 more max years, but then 2 or 3 more pretty expensive years.
I think you can cross that bridge as you get closer to the expiration. All right, who do you got next?
I'm surprised we've made it this long without talking about the Bulls. I don't necessarily think it's a great idea, because it's just like, why are you giving up an unprotected pick for a guy who's like got 1 or 2 more prime years left? Oh, it's such a good story. He's coming home. Like, the Bulls have no rim protection. They're running this weird defense this year where they give up no threes and everything at the rim. If you're going to play that way, it would be nice to have an elite rim protector. So, like, sure, Anthony Davis can protect the rim while everybody else stops the 3-point line. So, like, it'd be fun. It'd be fun to watch. I'd love to see some of the lobs that Giddey throws Davis. These notions that they should trade like Kobe White and multiple picks and Vucevic, like, that's just too rich for my blood. But they're the most popular team out there, I think, right?
So they're my number one team. And they came to me as I went through every single team multiple times as a team I think has the most sensible case to trade for him this year. So there's a big counter to that. I'll get to that a little later. But when you're looking at the Bulls cap sheet, they're obviously going to be viewed like, if they keep this up, and I don't expect them to be like a top 3 team heading to the playoffs, but even if they're like in the top 6, 7 range, they might be itching to do something. So keep in mind, the Bulls, they're going to have a lot of cap space next year. And that's while including the being able to re-sign Kobe White after. They could have like 50 million cap space and re-sign him after. So when you're looking at this Bulls starting core, you could make an upgrade at the 3. But I think the biggest thing they might want to start looking at is the 5. And as good as Nikola Vucevic has played last year and this year so far, I think that's where you want to start looking ahead. He's 35 years old. And if the Bulls are going to make a meaningful push for the playoffs one of these years, I think they're going to need a 2-way center. Ideally one that also stretches the floor. Now that isn't exactly AD, like he could hit the occasional 3. I wouldn't call him a stretch center, but he could definitely play outside of the key a good amount. So they have so many expiring contracts to get it done. Vucevic, Collins, Herder, like even maybe they could get off a bad contract like Patrick Williams in the process. What makes it a little better for the Wolves case is I think they're going to get the Blazers pick this year finally. Remember, in 2021, the Blazers traded a lottery protected first round pick. It sent Lauri Markkanen to the Cavs, and the Bulls got Larry Nance. The Blazers entered a rebuild immediately, and they've kept the pick every year. And there's a very good chance that pick's finally going to convey. Right now, the Blazers are looking like they should be in the playoffs. We'll see if that holds up. So if they make the playoffs, the Bulls get it. So now you have a little extra draft pick to get something done. I don't think that would be enough for AD, but if you're the Bulls, you're offering significant cap flexibility, the most cap flexibility probably than any other realistic offer out there. And let's say it's a Blazers pick, and then one future Bulls pick. I think I like the idea of getting a future Bulls pick. Like, there's not quite as enticing as like a Kings pick, or how I'm starting to value Clippers picks. But you never know. The Bulls, they gave up what ended up being the Franz Wagner pick, another lottery pick in 2023, which was Jett Howard, but still it was a top 12. It was like the 12th pick, something like that. Like, there's a pretty good likelihood that pick can be something pretty high in the future. So I think they've got the value. I think they have the flexibility to get to really entice the Mavs. There's a lot of value in that they can trade so many expiring contracts. I think it just comes down to, are you going to be willing to make that significant investment in the future for a 33-year-old, soon to be 33-year-old big man?
Yeah, that's why I'm out. I just don't think it makes sense for a team at this stage to trade for somebody at that age. Like, I think if I'm the Bulls, there are other ways I can take advantage of what's happening in Dallas. I think Najee Marshall would be a godsend for them. They could very much use an athletic, big defensive wing that's a little bit more of a shooting and offensive threat in general than Isaac Okoro. Like, Najee Marshall is not an elite 3-point shooter. He's better than Okoro, and he can handle the ball a little bit. I could see them going for Daniel Gafford at a much lower price point with one of those expiring contracts, maybe. Like, there are other ways for the Bulls to take advantage of what's happening in Dallas. I just think if you're trading like real assets to get Anthony Davis, you have to do it because you think that gives you a real chance to make the finals. And like, the Bulls aren't making the finals with Josh Giddey and Anthony Davis. Like, they're not good enough. It's that simple. Like, are you really giving up multiple first round picks to like maybe make the second round? I don't think that's worth it. Remember, that's sort of what they did with Vucevic, right? Where they're just like, we want to take the next step from play-in team to playoff team. And they wind up giving the Magic Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter. Their picks aren't quite as valuable at the moment, but I just don't think they're good enough to justify an investment in a player that old, especially when the next contract is probably going to be ugly. And like, if they do decide to re-sign Kobe White, he's not going to be cheap. Josh Giddey's contract is reasonable, but it's not cheap either.
Yeah.
Like, they are stuck with the Patrick Williams contract. I know they have a lot of financial flexibility, but that can evaporate very quickly if you're paying max money to a guy in his mid-30s. So
Yeah.
I understand why people make the Bulls, like why that's the team that comes up. I'm personally not high on them.
So here's the case against the Bulls doing it. One, I think the Mavs are going to demand Kobe White because that's like a guy I would love to pair Cooper Flag with going forward. I think I want to say he's still like around 25. So he fits a timeline and just the type of player you would want to surround him with. If I'm the Bulls, I don't want to do that, especially because that kind of messes with the cap space plans. But then the other thing is I think there's a very good opportunity in free agency. Again, these are mainly restricted free agents, so the likelihood of them actually getting one of these guys is pretty low. But why not save the assets and potentially make a big swing at some of these upcoming restricted free agent centers? You've got Mark Williams, you've got Walker Kessler coming off the shoulder surgery, but still, maybe there's a number that you can that might be enough to dissuade Utah. Jalen Duren is going to be a restricted free agent, and it seems like he's going to be getting, if he keeps this up, he'll probably be an all-star. And I don't think, I don't know if we're getting into Aiden territory where the progression plus a deep playoff run could push him to demand the max or something. But I remember someone reported he wanted about like 30 million a year, and I think so far he's starting to justify at least that. Could maybe the Bulls make a strong offer sheet at one of these players? Maybe an offer sheet big enough to make these teams uncomfortable to leverage a sign and trade. The point is, I think there's a lot of other options out there the Bulls can pursue at center. And for that, I would probably not do the Davis trade. And they're my number one team, which makes me more pessimistic that there will be an Anthony Davis trade, because even the team I think is the best fit and situation for him for this year, I still think should abstain.
All right, let me throw a couple of fun ones at you. Zion Williamson and DeJounte Murray for Anthony Davis and Klay Thompson. Could the Mavericks get Joe Dumars to give up another unprotected pick? I think I'd consider that if I were the Mavs.
I just can't.
Unprotected Pelicans pick?
I just can't even fathom the possibility of Anthony Davis going back to the Pelicans. Like,
he's coming home, Yossi. Everyone's sending him to Chicago. He has another home. He lived in New Orleans for quite some time. I'm just throwing it out there for fun. You're the one who keeps trying to trade Sabonis to New Orleans. You keep saying they want a veteran center. Like, honestly, Anthony Davis with Derek Queen is not crazy. Jeremiah Fears could be like a good pick and roll partner for him.
Hey, my friend who's a Kings fan started he was texting me today saying like, I guess the Kings might finally be embracing a rebuild of some sort. So, hey, that's still in play.
By the way, they thought they were slick leaking that on Nico Day. We didn't miss that. We're gonna get back to that. Trust me.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, we should. I'm sure we'll get a Kings episode coming up soon, if that's true. Okay. The other teams I've got that are again more opportunistic. I mean, this one might not even be opportunistic. I could see the Raptors being interested in AD. I don't think they should, but I don't think like fit and the roster construction has really factored into some of their decisions recently. What do you think of something based on like Pirtle, Barrett? I think that could make most of the money for AD.
We have to do this every time now because of Kawhi and like Damian Lillard. Oh no, the Raptors are lurking. Like, oh, Kevin
the Ingram
Durant.
trade.
Like, yeah, I guess they did it with the Ingram trade, but like Kawhi was the one where it's like, no, they got a real A-lister and they came out of nowhere to get him. So like now every time one of these guys becomes available, we have to do the Raptors are like a real sleeper for this guy. Like, no, it doesn't make sense. If you have Scotty Barnes and Anthony Davis, like where are you going with that? Like nowhere. Could I see them doing it just because nothing else? They've got nothing else going on. Sure, but yeah. I don't think that they're that. I wouldn't do it. No.
Again, I'm not trying to make sense. I'm just saying I could see them potentially going that direction.
If we're doing the I'm not trying to make sense thing, why haven't we talked about Sacramento yet? You're telling me Vivek wouldn't think about it? You're telling me Vivek, because we had this conversation with Rudy Gobert like a month ago, where I said at some point in this season, I think Vivek is going to do something weird. And something I could see him doing is trading for another big instead of trading Sabonis and saying, we're going to try to do what Houston does, where they get all the offensive rebounds and they're giant and they score a bunch inside, and just totally misunderstanding why that works and why it makes sense. You're telling me that the Kings wouldn't think about like Zach LaVine, Keon Ellis, and a first for Anthony Davis?
If those reports or rumors are wrong, then yeah, I'm sure they would. But you made a good point in our last episode that would Anthony Davis even want to go to Sacramento? There's been a lot of players in the past. How much
leverage does he have?
I mean, I think he has some. If he's not going to extend there, I don't think a team like the Kings or Pelicans should even like take the risk.
If it's one first round pick, this is not Anthony Davis when he's 25 and his dad's going on ESPN and saying he doesn't want to play for the Celtics. Like, he's at a different stage of his career. If some team is willing to pay him, I think he should keep an open mind about it, because I'm not certain that there are going to be championship contenders lining up. We talked about the Warriors. We talked about the Lakers. There's one more team that I want to get to, but I'm not sure the majority of the teams that are going to be in on this are teams that he'd go to and look at and say, I would have been interested when I was 25. I think now the name of the game is like, if I can go somewhere where I know I can get paid, I'm feeling pretty good.
Well, who's the team?
We should talk at least a little bit about the Knicks.
That was going to be one of my next teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated situation. I don't know that the Mavericks would want Karl Anthony Towns, but at least he could play power forward and shoot well enough that you could function with him and Gafford and Lively on the team. More likely, it's a 3-team trade that sends Towns somewhere else. The question for the Knicks is, what kind of team would you be if you had Davis and didn't have Towns? Because Davis can't shoot like Towns. It's going to be harder offensively if you're playing him at the 4 next to Mitch. But if you're starting Jalen Brunson with Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Anthony Davis, and Mitchell Robinson, you're one of the best defenses in the NBA and like still pretty good on offense. You can do the Houston thing. You'll get all the offensive rebounds. You can have 5-out spacing offenses, like lineups where like Mitch is sitting, we're putting Davis at the 5, and we're starting Deuce McBride with those other guys. Like, it's interesting. It's tempting. I don't know if they'll do it because the vibes are so good early in the season. It's worth the conversation at least.
Yeah, that would have to be the trade if the Knicks want him, because then otherwise you have to part with multiple of these guys and like at least an OG and Mikal Bridges, and I think that defeats the purpose of bringing in AD, where you want those players to surround him. So it's that's again like a big philosophical debate, I suppose. Like, do you think you need one? I think that would come down to, is Mitchell Robinson going to be healthy enough? Which right now it's been a little concerning, his health early on. So if he's not going to be, can you get another? I would probably try to get a different rim protector and still keep Towns. So I would be surprised if they went that direction. I think
I
they
mean, we
just
know
want.
that they were willing to go for it with Giannis. Now, Anthony Davis is not as good as Giannis. Would you agree with me that straight up Anthony Davis is a better player than Karl Anthony Towns?
For this year, if I want to win a championship, yeah, probably. But I
Yeah.
think based on the Knicks construction right now, I think I'd rather go with the combination of Towns and Mitchell Robinson, plus whatever other depth pieces they have, because I think I'd rather stick with that. Have the optionality to do pure 5-out and still be able to get the elite rim protection for Mitchell Robinson. I think that's like it would. Mitchell Robinson would have to like have some major injury, and they'd have to struggle to find other options. And I highly doubt both those things happen.
It's really fascinating because all last year and even into the playoffs, the question was, can you defend well enough to win a title with a bad point guard and a bad center with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns? Trading Towns for Anthony Davis in whatever fashion it took would address that. You would no longer have a bad point guard and a bad center defensively. But then you have to ask the question, can you win it? Can you score enough to win a championship with Anthony Davis and Mitchell Robinson playing together in a front court, because your spacing would be so compromised? And I don't have the answer to that, but at least you do have the option as a team to mix and match the lineups and like, we're going to stagger these guys and they're only going to share the floor for so many minutes. And we can play 5-out when Anthony, or 4-out when Anthony Davis is at center. It's tempting. I'll put it this way. I think if in the moment the Knicks made the Karl Anthony Towns trade, they were told they could trade the same package for Anthony Davis, they would have chosen Anthony Davis at the time. But they've had Towns in the building now for a little bit more than a year, and they're playing very, very well. They have to be happy with the early returns on Mike Brown. I think when push comes to shove, they'd probably say no, but I think they're one of the few like true contenders. I would say they are the single best team for whom a true conversation here makes sense.
Yeah, but I think, do you agree like a lot has to go wrong specifically with Mitchell Robinson for them to consider that?
No, I mean, I think you can justify it by just saying like, when they're both healthy, we're going to stagger them and we're not going to play either of them too many minutes. It's totally justifiable. They're both injury risks. So like, if you could play Anthony Davis 32 minutes a game and Mitchell Robinson 20, there's barely any overlap there. You're fine. So
Yeah.
I don't think you have to think of it that way. It's just a simple matter of like, would you rather have Towns or Anthony Davis? And I think there are arguments on both sides. Ultimately, I think when it's close like that, inertia wins out. I think that's the reason they probably wouldn't do it. I'm just saying I think it's worth the conversation.
So I want to look at the chat because we ran out of teams, but there are some trendy ones I've seen online and some coming up in the chat. Regulator asked, what about AD to the Heat?
I thought about that a bit, but the conclusion I came to is that, like, why are you breaking up Bam and Kel'el Ware? Kel'el Ware's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't
agree.
trade Kel'el Ware for Anthony Davis. They wouldn't trade him for Kevin Durant over the summer. Like, I thought about, like, is there a world where it could be like, would you trade Hero for him? But then why would you do that? You're not going to move Ware to the 3.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, the Heat are playing really well right now. I would be looking to trade for a star, but I'd be a little bit pickier about it than I would have a few months ago, because this revamped offense and with Norm Powell playing as well as he is, and Ware taking a leap and having so much, like, just pure physical upside, given how athletic he is and the tools that he has, I just see no reason to break up that front court.
That, and also maybe there could be some complications with Terry Rozier's trade status with him being on leave. But even if you could include him, you still have to include like Wiggins or Hero just to make the money work. Like, I would not be comfortable trading Powell or Mitchell right now to make the money work. And think with what the Heat have going, you want to add Hero to the mix. I think he can really help juice that offense a little more. So I don't like the idea of having to trade the amount of players needed just to make the money work. And I don't want to marginalize Khalil Ware. If you're going to play AD and Bam, it's going to be very hard for Ware to get meaningful minutes. There's a possibility where Ware breaks out this season, next season, and then you've got a great big man under team control for the next few years. So I think they should just stick with what they got. Another one in the chat, Sean Ford brings up Boston. I think we are in agreement that the Celtics will probably, not now, but maybe in next offseason, try to pursue another star to pair with Tatum and Brown. But same issue with the Warriors, 35% max players is just too much. Anyways, we're trying to deduct the tax this year.
Well, hang on for 1 second. Would you consider Jaylen Brown for Anthony Davis?
No, I would not.
You wouldn't?
No.
I think ultimately I agree with you, but I thought about it for a second. A year ago, I would have. I just think with the injuries, it's with Tatum having his injury issue too, I wouldn't want to bank that much on two guys who are health risks.
Yeah, for me, it's like an emphatic no. I wouldn't even consider it. The other one that I actually did think of this team at first when I started going through the exercise, but then when I revisited, and especially with the way they've been playing, I decided no. And this is brought up by K-Town, Detroit. And he specifically pitches a Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey type package. You probably, since they're under the first apron, maybe that's enough. 26 plus 10, 36. It would probably be like another minor salary like Sasser or Paul Reed. Here's the thing about the Pistons, and I think we're going to eventually get into a deeper conversation about them because they're first in the East. They have not the best defense, but it's pretty much, it's up there. A move is going to come at some point. It might not be this year. Maybe they don't even have to make it at all. With the way Isaiah Stewart's playing, they've been able to play him. Oh, I took out the sheet. They've been playing him with Jalen Stewart a good amount. And that is something that Monty Williams tried to do early on, but now it's actually starting to work. And with Stewart making $15 million this year, the next year, plus a team option the following year, you've got enough rim protection, more than enough rim protection. When you include that Asar, he can drop at times, like play some small ball 4 or 5. Why do you need to bring AD on top of that? I think when the Pistons do make their move, it's more so to upgrade the 4, where Tobias Harris has been absolutely great for them, and especially with the usage he has. Also, though, in year 15, so eventually they are going to have to look to make an upgrade. I really like the idea of them getting like a Jaren Jackson Jr. When I went to that ASU trade competition, the team as Detroit traded for Michael Porter Jr. That's something that kind of interested me in the sense that you get him right out this contract with an understanding that you would extend him to something much lower. So it's like a tenable contract where you don't have to depend on him closing every single game. I think there are other moves that the Pistons have. There are much better options I think the Pistons have than AD.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about Cat for them at one point, but the other thing, aside from Jalen Duren playing as well as he is, Isaiah Stewart rules, and I don't know that I would be thrilled about getting like another big to play on top of him. I might just wait this out and be opportunistic and be like, let's give this a year or two. Let's see where we are at that point, and like maybe be a little bit pickier because we're going to be maybe not a recruiting force in that market, but having Cade and having a couple of years of playoff success under your belt, I think you could do better. Can I throw one out that I just thought of?
I just want to say, Isaiah Stewart's been awesome. He's going to be extension eligible this summer. His max extension would give him the Naz Reid contract, like 21, 23, 25. That seems like something that if he continues playing like this with some marginal improvements could be a pretty good contract out in the future. But anyways, go ahead.
I'm so glad that you brought up the Naz Reid contract. because I'd like to bring up the Minnesota Timberwolves. Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, and Rob Dillingham for Anthony Davis and Klay Thompson.
Okay, so Gobert, Naz Reid.
No, Julius Randle. They're keeping Naz Reid because they need a big who's a reliable shooter. The idea here would be that you're now starting Anthony Davis and Naz Reid, and having Naz Reid in the starting lineup helps you breathe a little bit more with Jaden McDaniels at the 3, and then you'd start DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards.
I do want to talk about the Wolves because they do have some real light interest, it seems, in Ja Morant. They're definitely interested. It seems like they're gonna want to address point guard. And the issue with the Wolves is I kind of have a problem with them potentially like going after another max player again. After they traded, like the cat trade really upset me, where they made something that worked and then they completely pivot off. And okay, thankfully it worked, but now you're invested in this team that is like 7 deep, 7, 8. It's like 6 deep, and then a half depending on if Conley and Dillingham could contribute something. I think I just want to continue with this core. I like it. I like the team they've had. Yeah, they got a little lucky with the Warriors injury and them getting back to the conference finals. Where I've fallen is I just don't think they should make a big consolidation trade for even Ja Morant. So yeah, I wouldn't do it for AD, especially who's making $15 million more than Ja. I'm looking at the Wolves situation where I think the type of point guard upgrade I would do, given their financial limitations, they're over the first apron, so they have to aggregate but do 100% match. I feel like I would just do something as small as trading Conley and a couple minimum salaries for like a Dennis Schroeder. Like, I think that's all I would do from the Wolves. You might not even have the juice to get AD and Ja Morant or any other All-Star because you don't have any first round picks to trade. And then all you really have is
function as a first round pick.
So he's the eye of the beholder. It just depends how much the team values him. And I think if I'm Memphis, that does make a great deal of sense if that's the best offer out there. That's where I fall with the Wolves. I think they need to stop tinkering in the macro and just do some smaller moves to address point guard. That's all I would do.
Yeah, see, I totally disagree with you on this. Like the problem Minnesota has is that they've clearly been passed by not only Oklahoma City, but Houston, Denver, and frankly, the Lakers, based on how they played early in the season. Like, they're the 4th or 5th best team in the West at best right now. They have no chance against Oklahoma City. And even if Oklahoma City has a bunch of injuries, I think they'd lose to Denver or Houston. I know they have the great history against Denver or whatever. I just think Denver's better than them. But they don't make up for being in the middle of the pack in the West playoffs with future upside, because San Antonio's better than them. And there are a couple other young teams that are ascending that I think could pass them as well. Like, they just, to me, look like a perpetual 5 seed. Pick a direction. I don't care. If you want to go all in for Anthony Davis now, you have a pretty good chance at like genuinely competing for the next 2 or 3 years. Or you take a step back and you say, we're maybe going to get off of one of the, Gobert or Randall, and we're going to like focus on our younger guys, give them more minutes, and say, maybe we're a play-in team this year, but we're building something for the future. To me, it's one or the other, because as it is right now, they're just going to like lose competitive first-round series or get bounced easily by Oklahoma City in the second round pretty comfortably for the next few years. Like, they're not good enough. They're good enough to make the second round. They're not good enough to win a championship.
Even if that's true, which I don't really agree with, yeah, they're not like a top tier title contender. They could look into it. Now, keep in mind, Anthony Edwards, I think, is still getting better. Jaden McDaniels has gotten a lot better offensively this year. This team, the core players that are going to be around for the next 5 years plus, hopefully, are still probably going to get better.
Remember, I'm not trading any of them. I'm trading Randall and Gobert.
Right, but look, Randall and Gobert, like, they might not really raise your ceiling, but they get the Wolves to the playoffs, which that was kind of like
the number. To me. I don't care about losing in the second round.
But
I want a ceiling raiser, not a floor raiser.
Okay, but I'm gonna get to that. they traded for Gobert to raise their ceiling, a trade that I didn't like, and I probably would have liked if they negotiated a little better. But they're going to get to the playoffs every year. And when you think about what has been going on the past 15 years or so, that's huge for them, that they're a consistent, competitive team. So they already got that. What is one of the biggest things that you, Sam Quinn, have been pounding the drum, or maybe more so like raising the alarm on in regarding the Wolves' future?
I mean, there are plenty of them. I mean, I think the biggest one that I have right now is that there's no point guard.
No. I'm talking
Which
like...
Because I have a lot of concerns about there, because they have no pick. That's another one. There are a lot of concerns here.
You've probably been the only person in NBA media to raise the possibility of Anthony Edwards leaving the Wolves whenever he becomes a free agent.
I mean, that's several years down the line. That's a valid fear, but that's several years down the line. All I've been saying is you got to give him a reason to get excited now, or give him a reason to get excited in 2 years. But as it stands, if you're just going to lose in the first or second round every year, he's gone.
I don't know about that, because here's the other side of this. You can make a trade for John Moran. You can make a trade for Anthony Davis. But there's a lot of downside in acquiring both those guys. Anthony Davis has a huge injury history, and there's a chance that if they bring him in, he might not make it through playoffs. John Moran, even if he's going to play a little better than he's playing now, I'm not going to even consider the idea right now that he gets back to 2023, 2022 form. We're so removed from that. I need to see it first. But even if he is not a negative, I still feel like there's some fit issues there. I don't think that's the most cohesive fit, bringing him in along with Gobert. I don't think he and Edwards exactly make each other better. So when you make a move, when you're trading for an all-star and it doesn't work out, then for a team especially as leveraged as the Wolves that don't have any draft picks, I think you put yourself at a greater risk at Anthony Edwards potentially wanting to leave in the future. So I understand when you look at the Wolves roster as is, they might not scream a true blue title contender, but you could easily mess up a pretty good thing they got going on. And
you're just watching that team slowly bleed on the ground is what you're doing. You're just letting them bleed out as a 4 or 5 seed every year. The simple fact of this is Julius Randle is not good enough to be the second best player on a team that wins an NBA championship. I don't know if we both agree on that, but I feel pretty strongly about it. They need a player who is better than Julius Randle. I don't think Ja Morant should be that guy, but I think Anthony Davis hypothetically could. That's all I'm saying. Given the absence of picks, and given Rob Dillingham has not shown that much, there's still upside there, but he's not the most valuable trade asset. You're probably not going to be able to trade for the 28-year-old version of Anthony Davis, which is what you'd want to do. You can't. That guy's not out there. You can't afford him. But given how relatively weak Anthony Davis's market could be, you could get the 33-year-old version of him. And am I saying that doesn't come with risk? Of course not. That's a very risky move. I'm just saying the reality here is they got to take a risk at some point, whether it's this or something else, because they're just going to win 49 games for the next 3 or 4 years and lose in the second round. And if that's what they do, I just don't see why he would stay there.
I'm not saying they shouldn't make some type of risk. I'm open depending on the player, but their margin of error in my eyes is so low right now, given their draft pick situation, given their financial flexibility, that if that trade, whether it's AD or Ja, goes wrong, they might not be able to recover from it by the time Anthony Edwards is up for an extension. I think they got to be very careful if they make that type of move. And I kind of doubt that they will be able to get someone a little safer because they lack draft picks. So I don't know, I think we clearly disagree pretty big on this one. One of our bigger disagreements. I think there are better targets that they can make use, and I would just do something a little smaller scale because I think the Wolves are pretty damn good. They defy my expectations every year, and you never know. Maybe they can make it yet again back to the conference finals.
Yeah, maybe they could get to another 5th game against the Thunder.
One last team I saw in the chat, Portland. Sean Ford, it says Portland. If you do a Jeremy Grant and like a pick and a guard plus a guard, let's see what that look like. I mean, I think if you're Portland, I didn't really put
They're
much
not
thought
afraid of
into
bad
it.
contracts, as we know.
I
That's
think I
not
just want
that's
to,
not the craziest thing, but I don't think they want to do it. Donovan
yeah,
Clingan is good. I don't think there's any like you'd have to be playing them together, and I think given the existing spacing issues that they have, that's probably not the best idea. There are already like a lot of old guys on that team. It's not crazy. I kind of don't see why they would mess with something like they don't need to get better on defense. If they were going to make a big move, we've talked about Lowry Markkinen for them because that's a guy who does something that they need, which is more shooting. I think if you get Anthony Davis, that's just a little redundant with what you already have. You don't have the interior scorer like that, but with Klingon, you already have a really good rim protector. Your defense is in good shape. You have a lot of guys playing forward already.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm satisfied not doing it. It's
Okay,
not crazy.
so I agree. It's not crazy. Here's how I would look at it. First of all, extremely low cost. It would have to be Grant plus, you got your expirings here, and then like at most a first round pick. But this would be something that the Blazers I'd only consider if they're looking like a top 4 seed. In which case, if you bring in AD, and you start him at center, and he's willing to play center primarily, I think he kind of is a decent fit with what they've got going on. But then the other thing is I would absolutely not promise any extension because by the time Anthony Davis's contract expires, that's when Donovan Clingan's projected his next deal would come on. And I think by then you're hoping Klingan is good enough to take the reins. The other value, which I'm just realizing, if you bring in AD, that could be really good for Donovan Klingan's progression to be around AD, learn some things, maybe get a little better offensively, practicing with him. So that's where I stand. It's like low opportunity. I'm kind of glad we went over Portland because the Drew Holiday trade was so out of the blue where at this point, like it shouldn't be shocking if they were to get AD. But it's a lot
Portland
of variables I put together.
Haven't they spent enough on mentors for their young guys? Like they got Scoot and Shaden, like all of these guards to learn from. You don't have to bring in another super expensive guy to teach Klingon to. And by the way, I think that's like I'm not going to say mentorship is overrated. I don't think you need to get a max guy to teach a young guy how to play. Like I think Donovan Klingon's going to be fine. He's a good player.
Yeah, but that's more so again, like if you're like a top seed and you really want to make that push to maybe win a first round series and the cost is pretty low, that's really the play. Plus, yes, maybe Klingon could benefit from it in the long term. So I think we went through everybody. So do you think an AD trade will happen this year during the regular season? That is.
Not only do I think it'll happen this year, I think it'll be like relatively soon. Unfortunately, we still have a month until December 15th, which complicates a lot of the salary matching. But like if I'm the Mavericks, I'm not putting him back on the floor again. Like that's just way, way, way too risky. So I'm looking at can I do this on the sooner end? If you're a win now team, you don't want to wait until February. You want to get him in the building as quickly as possible so you can like get him acclimated to your system. You can do everything you need to do to make sure he's going to be ready in April. So like with John Morant, I think the conclusion we came to is we didn't think a trade was going to happen. Anthony Davis, the trade is going to happen. It's just going to be a when, not an if.
I agree. It's a when, not an if. I'm just not sure if that when is during the regular season.
It would be so
tough.
irresponsible to keep him throughout the rest of the season for so many reasons.
I think, but like when we went through this exercise, like the best player I came up with that I could potentially see them getting was Kobe White. Like we didn't really get through any valuable picks. Like I think it kind of comes down to, do you think you can get a better package by waiting into the off season? And how do you weigh that versus the risk of holding on to him longer? But any potential regression and additional injuries. Yeah, it's okay. I think if they're okay with accepting the possibility that the return is already going to be so scathed, because it's going to be such low value compared to what they should have gotten for Luka, then yeah, I think they'll just do it. I would say I'm like a little less than 50%. I'd say it's like a 43% chance it happens.
Yossi, if they keep him this year throughout the entire regular season, one of two things happens. Either he plays well and stays healthy, at which point you have hurt your very valuable and important lottery pick, which would be irresponsible on your part. This is your last chance to tank. You got to take it. So that would be a bad outcome for Dallas. Or he plays badly and gets hurt, one or both, in which case his trade value is lowered, and you have also hurt yourself in the process. Trading him right now is the only way to avoid that binary. That's how you get out of worrying about his play, worrying about his health, and worrying about your lottery pick. You want to just be aligned and saying, we are going to tank this year. That's what's going to happen. You trade him now so you don't have to think about that.
Yeah, but they're going to be bad no matter what because they have no playmaking. They have no shot creation. This offense is going to remain the worst in the league. Whether he's not really going to help it with unless he has someone like Kyrie helping him. So you can also just shut him down for prolonged periods. They've shut him down now. They could.
Is that going to make trade suitors feel good about him though? Like if from a trade value,
I don't think they're ever going to feel good about his injury situation.
Right, but if you're trying to pump up his trade value, you're playing him 70 games and being like, "See, he looks fine. See."
Yeah, I think his odds went up. Of the don't get me wrong. Like the odds of Anthony Davis getting traded this season went out significantly because Nico Harrison is no longer running the team. I'm just not 100% convinced. I'm far less than 100% convinced it's going to happen this season. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Injuries could happen. Yeah. Let's see. We're about an hour and a half in. So we didn't really get too much into Kyrie Irving. Should we just get into a little bit?
I mean, there's only one team. It's Houston. Like, who else wants him?
So that is a team that came to mind when I thought about Kyrie.
It's the team. I'm going to shoot down any other team that you pitch.
So I'm agreeing with you that is the team. Like that is the team that immediately came to mind when I thought about who'd want him. Obviously, you got his buddy Kevin Durant there, and Fred VanVleet's out for the year. I just want to say this again. I understand Fred VanVleet's got the implicit no trade clause. If the Rockets wanted to trade him, I don't think that's going to be such a big impediment. Number one is that the no trade clause, the veto rights protects him from losing his bird rights in case he becomes a free agent because he signed the 1+1. But that only applies if he declines his player option. I don't think Fred VanVleet's going to decline his player option, so he's not at risk of losing his bird rights. So then the other thing is, well, will he agree to go to a bad team? I think there's ways to talk about this where, hey, we want to trade you. We need to trade you. We need to do something with your cap hold. We appreciate everything you've done, but I'm sure on some level, he and his camp are potentially like aware of those conversations that could be started. And then with the way the NBA works, I'm sure the team that brings in Fred will have a good conversation with him about, hey, like, I understand you're injured, but we think you'd be a good veteran presence. This is like if he goes to a team like the Mavs or the Nets, there's that part, but with an understanding that we could flip you later, kind of like the Thunder did with Chris Paul. So I don't think that's going to be such a big impediment. What I think will be a little bigger of an impediment for the Rockets getting a deal done is making the money work, because Kyrie Irving makes $36.5 million, and he's also, I believe he's got a trade bonus. Let me see. Yeah, he's got a trade bonus that would bump him up to like 40 at the trade deadline. So who are you attaching with Fred without gutting? It might be a little simpler than it seems, but
Dorian Finney-Smith is the first name that comes to mind. That gets you basically there.
But I mean, do you want to do that? I understand like he
I
hasn't played the year, but
you have
can
more
you?
than enough as far as wing defense on that team. Like, if anyone on that roster is redundant, it's Dorian Finney-Smith. It's great to
So
have him.
yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but he's movable.
So yeah. Let me see. I want to see if there's a way they could do it by combining multiple guys, because the issue, as you guys see, everyone, is that they're hard capped at the first apron, that 195.9. So they basically need to do dollar for dollar or get within like 38-ish million. So yeah, even if it was something like they do Capella and they anticipate they can't pay Tari Eason and then he's the primary value going out instead of a pick, that's still not getting you there. So yeah, it would in all likelihood be Dorian Finney-Smith, and then they probably got to attach another minimum salary. I mean, I guess that's something you consider if you can't get third apron target to the Rockets' Derek White, who makes less at 28.1 this
Who
year.
would Kevin Durant rather play with, Derek White or Kyrie Irving? Doesn't that kind of answer the question?
I don't think that's a foregone conclusion and be Kyrie. I think I think you want Derek White going forward. Like, I think if you can, I think he could understand that. Like, he's that White's younger. He's not coming off a horrible knee injury. And it's cheaper. It would cost a lot less. You could just get that done with like Fred and a couple minimums, or maybe Capella. But no,
Kyrie's a hooper, man.
it's super intriguing, and I think he definitely fits whatever Houston's got going. I really like it for sure. Yeah, other teams I kind of had a hard time figuring out. Oh, and then as far as
real wild,
so the Rockets have.
there.
So hold on, let me ask you this. So the Rockets have the swapping rights for the Mavs first in 2029. I'm sure the Mavs are going to ask for that. What do you think the primary value is the Rockets can, like the least amount of value the Rockets can get away with to get Kyrie Irving?
One good first round draft asset, like, and certainly not like a Phoenix pick, but like Kyrie Irving does not have that much trade value as a guy who's going to be 34 coming off of a torn ACL, making a lot of money and being kind of a mercurial guy in a locker room. Like, you don't know what you're going to get with him. He does not have that much trade value. Like, frankly, I think if there are offers, and I'm not convinced there will be, they'll be so low that Dallas will probably deduce that it just makes the most sense for us to keep him out this year, tank, and then have him in the building next year when he's still hopefully like a pretty good version of himself. So I don't think the offers are going to be that substantial.
Yeah, I think if you're Houston, you're only offering one of your own picks, and you got to be careful with that. Make sure, because they don't have their pick this year. They owe it to OKC. It's not going to be a great pick. So yeah, you don't want to trade any of the Rockets as the Suns picks. You don't want to trade the Nets picks. It's probably one of their own, and you got to protect it in case injuries happen. But
there's a much more fun team, though. Let me put this team out there.
Yes, go ahead.
What about Milwaukee? Where you trade Kyle Kuzma as the matching money, and they have their own pick in either 31 or 32.
I think it makes
Pretty
sense.
Interesting, right?
No, it's very interesting, and I think it's plausible. I guess the question comes down to are they willing to trade that first because they don't really have much else to trade? Maybe there's some trades they could make to get some of their picks. Maybe this is when the Bucks start talking to Portland. Maybe they could get some of their picks back somehow. I don't know what that deal looks like, but if that helps the Bucks trade a less valuable pick instead of that 2031 or 2032 first round pick, I think it's worth considering. I as far as how it could go down. Yeah, you get to Kuzma. So they're well below the tax. So they can use the full 8.5 million. Is it 8.5 million or get to within 25%? Let's just say they got to put out like 32, 33 million to get Kyrie. No, it'd probably have to be like 33. So you're talking about Kuzma. Yeah, you could. Yeah, no. So with the Bucks, they could do Kuzma and then just try to stack a bunch of these guys if possible, because there's not going to be any restriction to the amount of minimum players they could use starting December 15th. Because I would try to keep the Bobby Portis salary, like keep the big salary, your biggest salaries, keep them as much of them as you can for other
I'm
potential
going another way
moves.
though. What if you include Bobby Portis, but you get Najee Marshall back because you badly need a wing defender?
Yeah, no, that's reasonable. That's I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, there's definitely a bigger version of this trade that could be done. No, that makes a lot of sense. Here's another team I actually thought of where we just had a really big debate on them. The Wolves. I I would much rather have Kyrie. I mean, you know what? Maybe I should take a step back because the ACL injury, but the Kyrie that of the past years, even with some minor regression, I still think I'd rather have him than betting on John Morant and having to pay him on his next contract. What do you think?
I mean, I think it makes them better in the short term, but like you have a 1 or 2 year window in that case. And if it's a 1 or 2 year window, I'd rather that 1 or 2 year window be on Anthony Davis than on Kyrie. So I don't know. And I also I'd be a little hesitant to bring Kyrie into that market. I don't know how he would respond to being in Minneapolis.
I
Um,
don't. I think at this stage in his career, it shouldn't matter too much.
what's your matching money in that deal?
So again, I'll preface this by saying if I'm the Wolves, I would still rather just do like a Conley for Schroeder type trade. But if you're bringing in a plus shooter like Kyrie Irving, then I would feel a little more comfortable with the idea of moving on from Naz Reid or Dante DiVincenzo. So you're either way, you're going to have to trade one of the top five highest paid guys. And you're gonna have to do dollar for dollar. So if the trade is Reed, Conley, it's complicated. Maybe you could then, you can't really stack the minimums because then you're gonna have the apron issues. It's tough. I'm just saying, in theory, I like the idea more. I think realistically, they're gonna have to probably part with one of Gobert or Randall to make the money work. In which case, what else, how are you replacing that? And that's if PJ Washington was trade eligible, maybe there's something that could be worked out there, but it'll be complicated. And
I
then
don't
you're
think he's
just
really worth the trouble.
yeah, exactly. And then you're changing the roster too much. Where I think you're just risking an early playoff exit with all the time needed to get everyone and build up that chemistry. The Kyrie market is it's very difficult. I think it could develop early on. It just depends on like when is he coming back. I would have to say, yeah, he's far less likely to get traded than Anthony Davis. First, we need to find out if he's coming back. We need to see what's going on with guards around the league. If there's a team that's going to need to make a midseason trade to bring him in to help them. That's number one. But ultimately, I would agree that it's kind of Houston or bust, it feels like.
I mean, Milwaukee, I'm starting to talk myself into. That's just such a John Horst pull a rabbit out of the hat. We've been asking for like 3 months. Can he hold out long enough to pull a rabbit out of his hat and get another Giannis extension? Kyrie seems like that sort of move for a variety of reasons. So like I'm kind of intrigued by the Bucks, but Houston seems like if there is a team, it's probably them.
Yeah. And the only other thing with the Bucks, and look, as good as Ryan Rollins has been, yeah, they could probably do better as far as this year goes. But when I'm looking at what they need to improve, I think I'd rather use that the Kuzma trade slot for a better wing. Yes, AJ Green's been pretty good, but they're still pretty undersized at the wing. I would. I don't have any names off the top of my head. It's going to be tough,
Yeah.
but I would rather
like
them pursue an upgrade at the three than
I would
an upgrade
too,
at
but
point guard.
there's not a combusting team with a 33-year-old wing that they can trade for. I mean, I guess Paul George, but I wouldn't do that.
Eh,
Like you at a certain point, you do kind of just have to look at the talent available and say we're not talented enough to win a title, so let's take a swing on talent.
yeah. Um. Well, I think we could revisit Kyrie trades a little later, but Sam, This was a great conversation on the Mavs. I think we did a pretty good job of just explaining what's going to happen in the near term and what they should do in years in the future. You got anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I'll have a lot more stuff on all of this. I'm going to write about Anthony Davis trades for tomorrow. I'm going to write, my plan is to write something that covers fake trades for every tradable Maverick except for Cooper Flag. Not individual stories, but like something that encompasses all of that. Because like it's worth wondering, is there a Najee Marshall trade out there? Is there a Daniel Gafford trade out there? I think almost anything is in play. So keep an eye out for that on CBS Sports. We will have plenty covering all of this, all things Nico Harrison.
Yeah, we'd even cover Daniel Gafford. I think he could be like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's moved like if he's the first guy who gets moved. Very easy salary to move. Lots of teams that could use him right now. I think right now I would put him like highest percentage chance gets traded first. That's just my opinion, but we'll see. I'm sure as we get closer to December and then January, once trade deadline's really around the corner, we'll get into more nitty gritty role players and their trade markets. So everyone, thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us for this live edition. This was a very fun episode. We subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcasts. Sam and I have been on it doing about like 2 episodes a week. Really like the feedback and the numbers so far. That this is going pretty great. Subscribe to the Third Apron Substack. I've been pretty busy on there as well. Wrote about the Sixers and VJ Edgecombe. We talked about that in yesterday's episode. Wrote about some outgoing draft picks in 2026 and some to be monitoring, like the Jazz playing a little bit above their heads already, but they have to stay within the top 8 to keep their pick. Just situations like that, teams that might be motivated to steer up or down the standings. And I am also going to be writing something about the Mavs, hopefully coming out tomorrow. And so be on the lookout for that. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will be back soon.